Hello everyone, welcome to Music is a Journey. I'm Peter. Today I am going to start a series on all-female rock and metal bands in Japan. Of course, as probably a lot of people are aware of, certainly if you're watching this video because you saw this as a video about Japanese rock metal bands, all-female metal bands, you're here. If you're, one of my usual viewers, oh, thank you for coming by anyway. And yeah, what I want to do is start a series, which I've been threatening to do, on the all-female rock and metal scene in Japan, especially, yeah, like I'm saying, because of the scene has been so hot in like the last 10 years or so. And I watched a video as I was, checking out more information about the whole scene. There was a guy who did a video about the what's hot in the all-female Japanese metal scene and why it's so popular these days. And one of the things he said in his video was that it really started in 2014 with baby metal. Now, by this point, I'd already been introduced to at least one band whose history goes way back to the 1980s. And so I thought, I know that can't be right. I mean, from an international perspective, if you are outside of Japan, living somewhere else in the world, you probably first heard about this all-female Japanese metal scene going on with baby metal. And then, you probably heard about Aldios and Love Bites and Bandmate and all those folks. In fact, back around 2018, 2019, I watched a video on the Banger TV channel where they did a feature on all-female metal bands from Japan, and they actually did go back to the 1980s. So this person said that, and I knew that it was not correct, that, again, from an international perspective, you people out there outside Japan probably heard about this from 2014, but there had already been a scene going on. My reckoning now, after looking into it a little bit more, is that there was an all-female Japanese metal band revival happening around 2005-ish. And we're going to talk about that in a later video. But what I want to do first here is to go back to the 1980s. And in a way, this was easiest to do because I didn't need to buy anything. There is one very important band, and I'm just going to talk about them briefly now, but they don't quite fit in here for reasons I will explain shortly. But the band Shoya, they are probably Japan's the longest running all-female metal, rock, hard rock, heavy metal band. And I will explain about their history a little bit more because I was originally planning to do just one video talking about the bands that I recently picked up, and Shoya was one of them. So they are a very important band from the 1980s, exactly because they had a release career spanning from around the early 80s, 1983 or so, going all the way up to the late 90s when they finally broke up before getting back together again in 2005. So I'm just going to leave Shoya out of the picture now. And what I'm going to talk about are all the other bands that I came across. Now, I first watched a pair of videos on YouTube. They are all in Japanese, and they talked about all-female Japanese bands that formed between the 1960s up to the 1980s. And I can tell you, by the 1980s, there were just so many bands. We had punk rock, hardcore punk, we had new wave bands, we had pop bands, we had rock and hard rock, and of course, Shoya being one of the famous ones, going into actually playing very heavy metal, basically. But there was quite a scene going on at the time of all-female metal bands in Japan. Now, if I think of all-female metal bands that I listened to or knew about in the 1980s, Girl School and Rock Goddess from the UK, Vixen from the US, and I think that's about it. Other than that, women in the hard rock and metal scene were usually limited to front women, such as Lee Aaron, of Lee Aaron, which is up there, back there somewhere, Darby Mills of Headpins, or the singer for Smashed Gladys, and, there were several other acts. But in Japan, there just seemed to be so many all-female metal bands, and as we're going to see in a moment here, pretty much all of them only got as far as releasing demos, maybe a single, and in a rare case of one or two, an EP. I said I watched those two videos and they introduced some of the bands, but as a suggested video on the side, there was another video posted that had 3 tracks from 3 of the different bands that I checked out. And then while I was checking out information about releases of those bands, I came across a site that lists all sorts of indie rock and underground bands from Japan. So every band that I wanted to check out was listed on that site, and it shows basically the band's different lineups they had and their release history, but doesn't really go into detail beyond that. Then the person who had posted the video of the 3 metal songs, I will leave a link to that video below, as well as I will leave a link to that Japan Indies Rock website, and I will leave a link to this next thing I'm going to talk about. The person who posted those 3 metal songs in one video, I commented on his video and he replied saying that he wrote about it on his blog some years back, and he sent me the link, and that blog covers 10 bands, all female metal bands from the 1980s, a brief account of their history, their releases, and at the end it lists another 11 honorable mentions. So that's pretty cool to think that there were at least 21 all-female metal bands existing in Japan in the 1980s, at least. There may have been others who never actually released anything. So here we go. First of all, we have a band called Jet Maybe. They formed in 1983. In 1984, they released 2 tracks, Lady Racer and Aphrodite. And then in 1985, they released an official single with a song called Tempest, backed by Misty Drive. Now in 1986, they also appeared on a Battle of the Bands contest, and they won for Best Guitarists, but the 2 lead guitarist women in the band, so they shared the award for Best Guitarist. So it just goes to show, even in 1986, Japanese women playing lead guitar were of very high caliber. That's all I have for Jet Maybe, so let's move on to another band that existed around the same time called Flying Vision. So they released a demo in 1984. The demo included songs Dancing, Fly, Time Stop, and Marionette. Then in 1985, they released a live cassette. I got to mention that. That's kind of an important one. So they were invited to be part of this all-night heavy metal party that began on December 31st, 1984, and wrapped up early in January 1st of 1985. So exactly 84 to 85, all-night metal party. So they performed 2 of the tracks there. They are as track 5 and 6 on the original. There was a cassette as well as a VHS release. And then also in 1985, they released Dreamy Night backed with Dancing. But once again, they didn't get any farther than that. And a lot of these bands that I'll mention, their members later on went on to start other bands, not necessarily all female. So next I want to go to a band called School Daze, which was inspired by the title of a song by the Runaways. And they had a song called Glory Road, which actually appears on a 1980s Japanese heavy metal compilation CD of 5 tracks only. And that CD is called Amoral Emission Regulators Tokyo Crazy Rockers. And it is number 5. It's a 5-track disc. I think it was number 4 on there. And then they appeared in the famous Ikaten Battle of the Bands TV series, the very Battle of the Bands series that spawned the career of Ningen Isu back here, not female metal band, but famous Japanese metal band these days. And they performed a song called Take Me on that. But Take Me is more of a hard rockin' blues bass type song, and not as metal. Like Glory Road has more of that 80s metal feel to it. So that was School Daze. Looks like I wrote that they existed from 86 to 88, but they, again, they appeared in 89 on that program, which may have been the band's last gasp. So next I'll mention Valkylie, and Valkylie are important. I will talk about them again later on too, but as far as their 1980s goes, Valkylie was a band that was formed in 1985 and carried on till 1987 as Valkylie, spelled with an L, and then in 87 they changed their name to Valkyrie, spelling it with an R. And they broke up in 1991. Now, a couple of the members who formed Valkylie had previously in a band called Lamia, and Valkylie issued a 3-track four-track demo in 1986 called Lamia Shock. You can find the whole thing, I think, on YouTube somewhere. So this included a song called Shouting to the Hell, which was a last-minute track that was actually written by a guy from Anthem, I think it was. One of the guys in the Japanese all-male metal band Anthem. He wrote the track for them before they went in to start cutting their demos. So Shouting to the Hell, as well as Dark Lake, Liar Boy, and Crazy Avenue. Valkylie, after changing to Valkyrie, issued another demo a little bit later on, I think around 88 or so, and I think it was a 3-track demo before they finally broke up in 91. But we will see they got back together again. The original drummer and guitar player got together again in 2015, brought in a new singer and guitarist and a new bass player. And then the bass player got married and left the band, and they got in another new bass player, changed the name to Valkyrie Zero. But I'll be talking about them later on because I have a couple of their albums already. So that's Valkylie, and their style was more speed metal at the time. They are now more of a traditional 80s thrash metal band. So interesting that there was, an all-female speed metal band going back to 1985. So also on my notes here, I've got a band called Velle Witch. That's such a cool name. Velle Witch formed, I don't have when they formed, but in 1988, they released a demo called Blood Noblewoman. And they have some songs on here called C'est Petre, You're Possessed by a Witch. I really want to hear that. I'd really love to have that on a compilation. Titus Groan, which is interesting because there was a prog rock band in the 70s called Titus Groaned. And then another song called Rosenkreuz, which is interesting. So the band actually went for more of this occult type theme. They originally, I think was it these girls? I read there was a band that originally started out with face paint and were immediately deemed a satanic band, which in Japan that doesn't have the same weight as it does in Western countries. But I guess, still, hey, good for publicity. They ditched the makeup early on. And I'm sorry if I got this wrong. It might not have been Velle Witch. I scribbled it down here somewhere. But there was a Heavy Metal Force Summer Special Volumes 1 and 2 to live cassettes, and they have a track on each of those cassettes there. So Velle Witch is certainly a band I would like to hear if they would ever get back together again, or if their old stuff could at least be released on some kind of compilation. It'd be fantastic. So next, I got two. I'm going to just go to a couple of bands I've scribbled down here, probably late in the game. Probably these came from that blog that I mentioned covering the female Japanese metal scene. There's a band called Carmilla. Carmilla. They were the ones that wore the face paint. I see I've scribbled that down here now. And basically a horror-themed band. Well, still, I guess, suitable to follow Velle Witch then in this conversation. And then we've got another band here that I have listed as Carry On. They released a demo only. So there's just a couple of small notes I scribbled here in the corner because I was running out of space. So I'm going to move on with the ones that I got originally while checking out various other things. A band called Vixen, Japanese band called Vixen. In 1986, they released a demo. Looks like they had 5 tracks actually. And apparently, even the blog post I read about Vixen, there wasn't a lot of information available about the band, according to the author of the blog. But interesting to note anyway. Then we go over to a band called Battle Axe. Now, this is also interesting because, we had, I think, a British band called Battle Axe, not necessarily a female band, though. So a band called Battle Axe formed in 1984. They released 3 demo tapes, and one of their songs made it to a metal compilation called Go to Eat Metal Dam, and it looks like they broke up in the late 80s. So that's a band called Battle Axe. 3 more to go through here. One is called Magenda, and they are going to be tied in with a band called Rose, as you will see here in a moment. So Magenda formed in 1985 and existed through to 1990. They released a demo in 1987, which included a cover of Aerosmith's Mamakin, going back to their debut album. Other songs were Take Out, Star, and And another track, I can't read what I wrote here. It looks like I wrote Curl and Woman, but I'm sure that's not what it's called. Useless video this is, isn't it? Anyway, Magenda, okay, keep that one in mind. I'll put a link to all of these bands. If there are any videos on YouTube with samples of their songs, I will put links to those in the description of this video as well, so you can give them a listen. So it looks like they also had a single with 3 tracks released in 1989, and then in 1990 they released an EP. It looks like I wrote 6 tracks. Now, of course, all of these were only ever available on cassette or vinyl, so as far as I know, there have been no reissues on CD. However, I want to talk about Rose next, and it's because the lead singer of Magenda, after they released their 1987 EP, she left the band and formed a new band of all-female metal band called Rose. Now, as I read in the guy's blog, he said that basically the singer and bass player, I think, left, and they took basically the hardest rocking sound of Magenda and then just made it even more metallic, I guess, for the band Rose. So if you listen to the band, the Rose's 1988 EP, I've scribbled here that they had an EP, so Get It Down, Lies in Your Eyes, and a cover of Deep Purple's Speed King and No Way Out. So I guess, yeah, kind of is interesting that as Magenda, they covered Aerosmith, and then the bass player and singer left to start Rose, and they cover Deep Purple. So certainly influenced by Western hard rock and, you know, early heavy metal bands. So the person who wrote the blog made an interesting point, and I think this would be cool. There is enough material between Magenda and Rose that you could actually put out a CD compilation. You've got the 4 tracks from Magenda's original EP release, plus a 6-track, is that an EP or a demo? Plus a 6-track official EP release, and then Rose's 4 tracks. You could put those together. And then one more band that I stumbled across, it just came up as a suggestion when I was checking out Rose, and this was a band called Nasty Rose. And they existed, it seems, only from 1988 to 1989. They released a 3-track demo in 1989 with To All Bassmans. That's the name of the song, To All Bassmans. I Want to Be Free, and I don't know if that's a cover of Sweet or not. I couldn't find out any information about that. And then, but actually, I think their entire EP is demo is available on YouTube. So I could listen to it and find out if it's a cover of Sweet or not. And then they also have one called It's Forget Love. Okay, not like it really matters what all the track titles are, but once again, I will put links in the description. So what we have here, we have Jet Maybe, School Days, Flying Vision, Valkylie, Carmilla, Carry On, Velle Witch, Vixen, Battle Axe, Magenda, Rose, and Nasty Rose. That's at least 12 all-female metal bands from the 1980s. And once again, that person who wrote that blog on the scene also mentioned a list of other bands too. So we've got those, and of course, as I said, we've got Shoya, the one band who really made a success out of it. So, you know, there was quite a scene going on in the 1980s of all female Japanese metal bands, which is really cool to know. And once again, I would really love to see a compilation of all these bands, all these demos and singles and tracks from EPs. It would be great to have them put together on a 1 or 2 CD compilation. So that's all for today's video about the 1980s Japanese all-female metal band scene. Later on, we'll be covering the 1980s and early 90s, and I'm reaching back here because I already have this just came in the door a couple hours ago. This is Jacko Neko. I think this is their 2nd album called Hi People. We'll be talking about that one in the next video, as well as Ars Nova, a 3-piece prog band, all-female prog band there. So I'll be having a few different bands to talk about in that next video, and I will talk more specifically about the CDs that I have. So thank you very much for watching the video today, and hopefully I will see you in the comments, as well as in the comments to the follow-up video. And then, of course, I will eventually get around to talking about all these newer bands, currently existing bands that I have. Well, Aldio's not so currently existing at the moment. But anyway, thanks again for watching. See you in another one. Take care all. Bye.